Blueprints most often reproduce architectural or engineering drawings, diagrams and plans. They are often discovered in construction files, oversized map cases and maintenance records. Both blueprints and cyanotypes are produced using light-sensitive iron salts that lodge deep in the uncoated paper. Due to their acidic nature, cyanotypes and blueprints are frequently brittle and may have some brown staining or foxing that results from mold growth around minute metal particles in the paper. Blueprint and cyanotype images commonly fade when placed in an alkaline, buffered environment. An alkaline or buffered environment causes blueprints and cyanotypes to lose image detail and density. The images first turn yellowish brown before eventually fading to white. Exposed to light. Original blueprints and cyanotypes should not be used in exhibitions. Note: surprisingly, images that have faded or lost image detail due to light exposure can recover image density over time if they are stored in the dark in a neutral, non-buffered environment. That was an excerpt from Conservogram, July 1995, a publication of the American Nation Parks and Service. So now that we know how and why blueprints fade, why the hell are the blueprints on Alfie's desk faded? To be clear, a faded blueprint does not show up as a lack of contrast as much as it initially transitions to a brown state, and, in Undertale, not all blueprints are destined to fade. The blueprints that are in Sans' basement are well maintained, and even though they are left out haphazardly on the table, they show no signs of fading. This implies that the environment is sterile and the documents are well taken care of at least. These are Sans' blueprints he probably made himself. So why are those blueprints blue but the ones on Alfie's table brown? Well, a few possible reasons. Improper storage in a chemically reactive environment, advanced age, spilling the coffee all over it, and exposure to UV light, aka sunlight. But we're underground, Socky. Where are they getting sunlight from? Well, that leads us to one conclusion and a supposition I'll be holding for the remainder of the video. Don't ask where they got UV light from, ask where they got the blueprints from. These blueprints could likely be from the surface, and the surface, that's where they got light damage. As we know, the dump in Waterfall isn't the dump of monsters, it's the dump of the humans from the surface. Washua is here cleaning the area. It isn't a designated dumping ground for monsters, it's just that human trash is dumped here from the surface unknowingly. Trash flows from the ceiling of the cavern with the water and is deposited here. Here we find all sorts of things humans have invented. Bikes, guns, anime, but maybe also you may find an old blueprint or two. So to me, there are three reasons for why the blueprints in Alfie's lab may be faded. 1. The blueprints are from the surface and have been exposed to UV light. 2. In addition to that, they've not been properly stored or have been damaged by the dump's waters. And finally, if we just take the fading of Alfie's blueprints to be a sign of aging and nothing else, then 3. The blueprints are incredibly old. The last of those possibilities actually intrigues me. You see, it's always bugged me, the wording of entry 5. Entry number 5. I've done it. Using the blueprints, I've extracted it from the human souls. I believe this is what gives their souls the strength to persist after death, the will to keep living, the resolve to change fate. Let's call this power determination. What do you mean, the blueprints? What do you mean you believe this is what gives their souls the strength to persist after death? Weren't you explicitly looking for determination? You invented a machine to extract something you weren't even sure existed? That's like inventing an engine but you have no idea what the fuel would be. Why not say my machine or my blueprints? The phrase the blueprints and the lack of knowledge the author of entry 5 had towards determination initially implies that the blueprints come from a foreign origin, as if the blueprints for the determination extractor were given to the scientist or were found by them, not created by them. They used the blueprints and they are celebrating that the machine actually works and did something useful. This would imply, if the blueprints came from the surface, that the humans were the ones who maybe invented the determination extractor for human souls. What were they doing with the determination? I don't know, maybe that's why they're all gone in the credits. I always found it weird that on the surface, the humans, the ones that the monsters are meant to be in a forever war with and attacked Azrael on sight, they don't make an appearance at all. What happened to them all? Maybe that's how humans were able to make magicians to seal away the monsters, because humans can't intrinsically express themselves through magic, as the Snowden Library attests. Well, never mind that. Moving on. What are these blueprints on Alfie's desk for anyway? Well, from what we can see a soul change from what looks like a monster soul, changing from an upside down to a right side up position, implying that it transformed or absorbed into a human soul. It is then put into a phone-like machine, and assumedly, that phone then spouts a bunch of text. If I were to hazard a guess, these are blueprints on how to transpose a soul into a machine that then allows the soul to communicate with us despite its lack of physicality or natural form. A robot with a soul. That, viewer, is what I'm worried about. Remember how Mr. W.D. Gaster died? He fell into his creation. Well, consider this possibility. As I've previously theorised, W.D. Gaster wrote all of the normally written entries in the TrueLab. Watch the Writing on the Wall video for clarity in that regard. So it stands to reason that Gaster wrote entry 5. So Gaster seems to find or is given blueprints to which he builds a machine by using those blueprints as a guide, that machine being the determination extractor. But his determination experiments fail. He moves on to different areas of research, and I ask now, what research did he move on to? At this point, we know of only one other thing he could have possibly have done if he had to use blueprints, maybe from the dump, maybe from a second party, to create the determination extractor. Then maybe he used another set of blueprints to create something else. As an aside, in Earthbound, Toby's major inspiration for Undertale, the main characters need to travel back in time to the center of the Earth using a phase distorter. To do so, they must have their souls transposed into robot bodies so that they may survive the journey. Now, as we know, Gaster in Entry 17 is making something very, very dark, alluding to the possibility to a dark world. And if Undertale is also a dark world possibly, then we know that one character from one dark world cannot survive in the other without turning to stone. If Toby took inspiration from that plot point in Earthbound, then it may be that Gaster was also in need of some kind of robotic carapace in order to survive a journey into the unknown. Now, what do we see on Alfie's table? A blueprint, weather beaten from possibly age and UV light, sitting on top of her desk. And what is that desk used for? Well, it's a workbench for Metaton's body. You know, the robot with a soul. Let me explain something. Metaton is described as a robot with a soul, which he both is and isn't. You see, I've been faking everyone out this entire time. Metaton is a robot with a soul, but only eventually. You see, Metaton is actually a glamorous camp ghost called GasterBlook that inhabits a metal machine that Alphys previously had used as a puzzle machine in Snowdon. It's nothing special. Now, why would a ghost like GasterBlook want this box form? This box form is only a temporary measure that Alphys used to get the king to like her and promise Metaton that she would be able to make a better form for them later. She then delays making this final form of Metaton. This is while Metaton has become a TV star and has no time for her, because she doesn't want Metaton to leave her as he's the only friend she has. But why would making a body cause Metaton to leave? Well, Metaton thinks she's a dork, as per his diaries, and also once Metaton has the perfect body he was promised, he'd become not a machine, but corporeal, therefore no longer need Alphys anymore. You see, ghosts, according to Mad Dummy, who is a ghost possessing a training dummy, spend their whole lives looking for a proper vessel to inhabit. Then, slowly, they bond with their new form and become corporeal. This is what Metaton wants to do. I propose that Metaton has two states of being: his box form, which is merely a form that he inhabits as a ghost, and his glamour/neo forms, which he becomes actually imbued and corporeal, but not entirely. You see, a ghost, as stated, requires a lot of time to fuse with their new form, but does Metaton seem like a person who can just wait? This is what I think the switch is for. You see, during Metaton's fight, though he is not human, he has a right side up heart that floats out of his robot torso to attack us with magical electricity, as explained by Alphys. When that heart is damaged, his eyes go white like a goner's eyes, implying his soul has disconnected suddenly from his form it's attached to. He otherwise still cannot be damaged by us physically, meaning he's not fully corporeal, because Alphys found a way to speed up the imbuing process for Metaton, a robot with a soul, as in literally, a robot with a soul. Not like a monster's relationship with their soul where it's symbiotic, but more like a human's relationship with their soul. Transactional. And being that Mettaton's soul during his battle is white like a monster's soul, yet upright like a human's, it could be argued that he, GasterBlook, had already undergone the process as outlined on her table's blueprints, and has had his soul change so it can fit into the machine. As we know, Alphys does have the power, using technology from a phone, to rotate our soul during the fight, so there's a good chance that this is what she's already done to GasterBlook, now Mettaton. But in my opinion, he had his soul changed during our final fight with him, as that's what I think the switch is for. Like the button on our phone, it flipped his heart around, making him corporeal. And notice how when we press the button on our phone to rotate our heart, it resonates with Mettaton's presence. Very coincidental. Mettaton's switch doesn't transform his figure, it transfers his soul into the machine and transforms his figure. This is why Alphys is crushed when she sees Mettaton destroyed. She half-heartedly says she can just build another, but she's lying to us about his real nature. In reality, we didn't destroy a vessel and the ghost escaped, we actually killed the ghost. GasterBlook is dead. She never intended for Mettaton to lock her out of this portion of her plan in the story, so she told us how to make him vulnerable, make him corporeal. I think that heart in the center contains GasterBlook, and he controls the robot body like a mech, or a human. This is how he can be corporeal and physically lose parts as well. Also, if we don't kill Mettaton, Alphys is equally distraught about Mettaton's state until she realizes he's just damaged and needs his batteries recharged. But why would a ghost, if inhabiting a form they merely puppet, need batteries? And if corporeal, they would be a living creature and would also not need batteries. As we know, Mad Mew Mew and Mad Dummy both don't need batteries to move or even fly, unlike Mettaton, implying that he's dependent on a body for ambulation and has lost his ghost powers. Why? That's because Mettaton is actually, in this state, a robot with a soul, and as such requires everything a robot requires, like batteries and maintenance. Unlike his box form, he now resides in whatever small device is implanted in the chest of the robot, to which he then controls the rest of the body, which he is not corporeally a part of, like a human soul does to its body. And where does Alphys eventually take Mettaton's body back after we damage it and deplete its batteries in Pacifist? Back to the table with the faded blueprints. It all seems too coincidental. Now, why am I describing Mettaton like this? Well, you may have guessed Mettaton has something in common with Gaster. I believe Gaster to not just have transposed his soul into a robot, purposely or not, but I believe Gaster, Papyrus, Sans, GasterBlook, GasterBlook, and Redacted to all be related, maybe even literally, and that they're all ghosts. So first of all, let me show you something peculiar I noticed. Uppercase and lowercase speech. Who says what and how? Uppercase, we have Papyrus, Mettaton in his box form, and Gaster from Entry 17. These characters only speak in all uppercase and their fonts are different from one another. For lowercase, we have Sans, GasterBlook, and Redacted. These characters only speak in lowercase and also have different fonts. Notice that for each character, they seem to have a counterpart to themselves that are related somehow. Sans has Papyrus, his brother, GasterBlook has Mettaton, his cousin, and Gaster has Redacted, both of whom speak in Wingdings and seem to have been erased from this world. What could all this mean? Let's explain what we know for the moment and start with GasterBlook and Mettaton. GasterBlook is a shy but incorporeal ghost, so let's assume that's why they speak in a dull lowercase manner. The incorporeal undead are lowercase. Mettaton in his box form is a ghost inhabiting a robot vessel, but not bonded to it, meaning he speaks in a robotic, uppercase manner. So a ghost robot's speech is uppercase. So how do these characters, GasterBlook and Mettaton, relate to the other characters here other than the superficial speech correlations? Well, let's start and have a look at Redacted. Redacted is linked to Gaster through his enigmatic appearance, or lack thereof, in Undertale, and by their shared Wingdings font they use for speech. Though what little we see of either of them talking, we know that Redacted speaks in lowercase and Gaster uppercase. Redacted can be found, if he were added into the game, at Blook Farms. I've modded the game to show you how we probably would have been able to find them if they weren't redacted. No code has been changed, just the relevant objects added. So initially you would see a stable in Blook Farms that would be locked and nothing in it. Trying to open it would say that it's locked, but also suddenly from inside Redacted you hear a and then nothing. What that's supposed to mean I'm not sure, but I did find something interesting. The same wording is used here in Earthbound Beginnings, the Game Boy Advance game before Earthbound, when you first encounter a Starman, one of the game's quintessential villains. This also links Redacted to Papyrus and his Starman aesthetic that we are all familiar with because of that one MatPat video. From here we go to the GasterBlook's yard. There we would find a trash can that would probably be found behind GasterBlook's house. I think the boat person was alluding to this and hinting at it when he said, "Don't snoop behind people's houses. You might be mistaken for a trash can." So that's where I placed the trash can. That trash can, when interacted with, would have held a key. This would apparently open the stable, but it doesn't actually. You can't enter the stable. What we find is the redacted creature that seems to be inside the stable itself, and all it says is *X in lowercase windings, implying that what he was going to say has been redacted. Looking at the game files, we can see that they would have actually had 7 different dialogue options that could have appeared but seem to have been redacted. This dialogue in the code is also placed in the section where all of Blook Farm's dialogue happens, implying its relevance to that area, which implies Redacted was meant to be part of this farm at some point and probably a ghost. As you can see, Redacted Sprite appears to fade in and out as we close in on them, much like GasterBlook does. Combine this with his key being found in GasterBlook's yard, a stable being found in GasterBlook's farms, and we can come to the conclusion that Redacted was probably part of the Blook family and was a ghost. Hacking the game to enter the area that was probably the interior of the stable called room_redacted, we see the redacted creature and all they say is the word redacted in a lowercase font. The use of lowercase here and before links them both to Sans and GasterBlook. After leaving this room, we are immediately brought to the sound test room with Gaster's theme. The game then crashes after choosing Gaster's theme and waiting for the event to end. So from this we can see how Redacted, more or less, relates to nearly every character. To Gaster through their enigmatic nature in the sound test room, to Papyrus with the Starman reference, to GasterBlook by being what is possibly a redacted ghost character related to him and or the farm, and Sans by speaking in all lowercase. Now Papyrus. While not much can be said for Papyrus that is outwardly apparent, he does things and has things said about him that have some hints of him being a ghost inhabiting a shell. Some evidence I'll present may contradict that later, but either way, this stuff is very interesting. For one, Sans states that Papyrus calls his trademark outfit his battle body, a strange way of referencing it, like it's something separate from himself. And it is separate from his head, as we can see if we kill Papyrus, his head comes off his body and his body dies. This implies that his head and body have a Shiren situation going on, in which her and possibly his body actually are a separate monster or entity. In fact, Sans suspiciously draws attention to this fact in an old Tumblr post from 2015 that Toby did where he answered questions as if they were from characters in the game. Quote, "Here's the important info. About Shiren's lower body. Doing some research might help you." Now, the fact that his body dies after being struck may mean he is corporeal, but there is a chance, like Mad Dummy, who is a ghost inhabiting a body, that Papyrus was so shocked by being attacked by us that sudden rush of emotion caused him to fuse with his form, becoming corporeal. It's weak, I know. Anyway, his body is suspicious and possibly linked to a Metaton-style robot form or a Shiren-style symbiosis. His voice also sounds like a Metaton-like robotic voice. While we may assume that's just how he talks, it does sound very robotic. But also, like Mad Dummy, he can fly. He just flies over us. I mean, I know it's a gag, but he flies. Very ghost inhabiting a shell of him. Also, again, he has a brother, a relative like Metaton and GasterBlook, that speaks in all lowercase, which is a weird bit of correlation. Speaking of his brother, Sans has all sorts of weird properties that tie him to the others. Outside of his lowercase writing and familial relationship to his brother, he also may be a ghost in a shell. Notice how Sans talks during the final Azrael fight when he is a lost soul. His text reverts to a basic monster's speech. This implies that something has changed about Sans, which hasn't for his brother. If we assume Papyrus to be a ghost inhabiting a form, like Metaton in his box form, then it makes sense that his text remains unchanged as he's talking robotically. But Sans, however, what if he is a ghost that has fused with his form, and as such, that somehow affects how he talks, like Metaton in his Neo form. Maybe that's what Sans means during his genocide fight when he says he gave up trying to go back a long time ago. Remember what I said about the earthbound connection to time travel. In order to travel through time, the time travelers had to transpose their souls into a robotic form. Maybe Sans doesn't want to go back in time, but go back to his original form, which just speaks normally, which may be shown in the Azrael fight. But then there's opposition to that theory with the fact that Sans can be seen to be physically hurt and bleeds something during his genocide fight as well. Somehow I reckon he's possessing a form rather than that being his true form, but he also phases somehow through solid material and is incorporeal in his travel like GasterBlook is. Then, aside from his esoteric knowledge of what's happening in the True Lab and his travel anomalies, there's what he attacks us with in battle as well, his famous GasterBlaster, implying his and possibly by extension Papyrus's and maybe Alfie's knowledge of the former royal scientist. And to that end, remember the Tumblr post I mentioned? Look at what's written here. Sans ominously echoes the Gaster follower sentiment of, it's rude to talk about someone who is listening, and that not everyone is as tough as his brother. Now we know that the Gaster follower was talking about Gaster, so if in this instance Sans was also talking about Gaster because he never explicitly mentions that he was talking about Papyrus, that may also imply that Gaster is in fact his brother, which fits into the familial tie theme that's running through all these connections, but that's a maybe. And speaking of that famous royal scientist, Gaster, he was said to have fallen into his creation. This implies a transposition of his soul into something, but there's also that name that I've never really paid attention to. Not the WD part that links him to the Skeleton Brothers via his wingding speech. No, the Gaster bit. That's a very ghost-like name, isn't it? Like I never really thought about it before, but the ghasts in Minecraft or Ghastly in Pokemon, the name Gaster is very ghost-esque. His scar on his face and eyes also reminds me of the line on GasterBlook's face and his eyes as well. The possibility that Gaster may have transposed his body into a vessel to travel to a dark world a la Earthbound also speaks to the idea that he is now in a machine like Metaton. Gaster speaks in all capitals as well. His voice is synthesized out of multiple other voices, 7 to be exact. Which links him to Metaton and possibly Papyrus in terms of possibly inhabiting a machine and using some form of voice modulator, but also his all-capital speech links him to the Twitter posts that foretold the forecoming of Deltarune. Speaking of foretelling and the coming of something or having a hand in your own creation, Redacted may have had something to do with the creation of Undertale. During the end credits of Undertale, you may see a familiar name, that name being Name Redacted. So that's weird, right? So the question is asked, what are the credits from? Well, they are all Undertale backers from the original Kickstarter. Well, that's very strange because Redacted wasn't in the Undertale demo, so how would anyone have the foresight to name themselves Name Redacted? Maybe somebody was removed. Or redacted. So I go to the original Kickstarter and what do I find? The lowest tier to be in the credits, a limited tier with only 100 backers allowed. It only has 99 backers. Are you telling me that of all the tiers, the lowest tier of one of the most popular and celebrated indie games of all times, which had a massive hype behind it relative to its size due to the demo being so beloved, didn't fill all the way up? One space is left. That feels like someone was removed rather than it didn't fill all the way up. That to me is suspicious, but then there's the double brackets around the for early backers. Where have I seen the double brackets before? Oh yes, the end credits for the monsters in Undertale. The word cast is in double brackets. Is this to imply that the early backers in this tier are somehow monsters in the underground? I don't know, but it's very suspicious, especially being that I believe the credits for the monsters is more meta than mere credits. If you're not sure what I mean by that, watch my writing on the wall video. But coming back to the ghosts, how long have they lived in the underground? I theorise that they have been here for at least longer than the monsters, as GasterBlook, the shut-in, states this place used to get a lot of business, but our main customer disappeared one day. Now it's just some hairy guy that shows up once a month. Now, the main customer is the queen and the hairy guy is the king. Notice how GasterBlook, who has never been so far as the ruins and waterfall, doesn't mention that they are king or queen. This implies that he doesn't know they are king or queen. This implies that ghosts are native to the underground and were not part of the monster kingdom initially if they don't know who the king or queen is like Gerson does. Asgore and Toriel were, with the rest of the monsters, cast down into the underground by the humans. They've been alive for a long time, and prior to the Queen leaving, they had also done routine announcements together according to Gerson. Now, both Gerson and GasterBlook are long-lived, as they both know who the Queen is and she disappeared ages ago. The fact that GasterBlook does remember a time before the Queen left, re their main customer, but doesn't know that they were royalty, implies that they weren't part of the initial monster kingdom that was banished to the underground, unlike Gerson, who remembers not only the King and Queen, but the monster-human war. So if GasterBlook doesn't know who the King and Queen are, that means he and the other ghosts are in fact natives of the underground. Them being native to the underground makes sense, since in myth in real life, the undead are usually depicted as falling into an underworld like Erebus or Hell. It also makes sense that Sans and Papyrus are skeletons if they are native to the underground and ghosts, like I've theorized. Undyne states that all of GasterBlook's family have passed on to different jobs, so these ghosts do have extended family and they did gain employment elsewhere, maybe as scientists. All I'm saying is it's possible, and for 7 humans to have fallen down matching with 7 redacted statements in redacted speech, facts about these humans' nature and existence may be why redacted was redacted in the first place. He had 7 statements on the other human. So let's have a look at all the characters I've discussed so far and quickly recap how they correlate with each other. Sans, GasterBlook and Redacted all speak in lowercase, but also have the uncanny ability to appear and disappear. Papyrus, Metaton and Gaster all speak in uppercase in a weirdly possible and in terms of Metaton actual, robotic way. Sans has a strange change of text during his lost soul form, which makes him possibly a corporeal vessel piloting a machine like Metaton's Neo form, and Sans, aside from being Papyrus's brother, also has a Gaster blaster, which links him to WD quite heavily. WD Gaster has a ghostly name and is visually similar to GasterBlook, as well as talking in wingdings like Redacted, implying a possible familial relationship between Gaster and Redacted. This changed font from the game's regular text also implies a relationship to Sans and Papyrus. Papyrus is said to have multiple bodies, implying a ghost possessing a vessel, but also his current form is inspired by the Starman from Earthbound, which is strangely linked to Redacted's "suddenly from inside the redacted you hear our" text. As we know, Metaton and GasterBlook are related by being related, and notice how each figure that is uppercase has a lowercase relative. This implies that Redacted and Gaster are familiarly tied even more. So we have old blueprints, suspicious maybe robots in Papyrus, Sans and Gaster and all their strange relations with one another and the Blook family. So the question is asked, if Gaster is a robot, what is he? As in, literally, what is he? What form did he take? Well, the blueprints are our only clue, and Memory Head seems to be some form of phone monster that attacks with what seems to be Gaster-like faces. Not delve into that, I'm just going to move on. So I'm going to assume that Gaster put himself into some sort of old phone. Did you know that in the art book, Toby Fox said that our very phone was going to be our friend? Its very own character that he later decided against implementing. As you can see, it would have required charging, like Metaton's body does when you flick his switch and he becomes corporeal. But chargeable talking phones with a personality, that got axed. You can't just assume that Gaster could have been or that Gaster is a phone. But remember when I brought up in my Writing on the Wall video the concept of where a video takes place can be discerned by the background noise, and that entry 17 is probably a video as well. Well, what was the background noise playing in entry 17? Muse_smile. And where do we hear Muse_smile play in Deltarune? Through our phone's receiver in the Dark Worlds. But even then, that's a stretch, so is there anything else? Well, yes, we get a call from someone looking for G. Now, we don't know who G is in this case. It could be Gerson, who knows, but that doesn't explain how in the Japanese version of Undertale, Toby was very insistent that this line not be translated. The G, is important. Someone called our phone during a fun event, events that are heavily linked to Gaster, and asked for G. Why would this mysterious stranger be asking for Gaster if that was who he was looking for? Well, remember where we got our phone? Originally it was from Toriel. And when did Toriel leave for the ruins? Well, Gaster, according to my Writing on the Wall video, was still Royal Scientist when she left. Remember, she still has her phone, so whose phone did she give to us when she gave us our phone? Whose phone did she take back with her to the ruins all those years ago, back when Gaster was royal scientist. Why was the person calling our phone when they were looking for G? Basically, this has all led up to me wanting to say the line, "Who was phone?"